Today's project is accompanied by Little Brown Jug's black lager. They describe it as a deceptively light tasting black lager. And for a hot day like we're having today here, that seems like a good idea. So thinking back to when I ordered these little magnetic connectors that I got in a recent mailbag, it occurs to me that the reason that I ordered these was I wanted to experiment with them with a lighting project. A project inspired by this kind of modular hexagon light that, they've been around for a few years. I've seen them online here and there, and I've seen them a couple of times in real life in, restaurants and stuff like that, and bars. So I thought that those little magnetic connectors would be a good idea for joining things like this together. Now, a normal person would probably go looking on Thingiverse or Printables or something like that for a design, but I decided to take it as a challenge, so I CAD'd up this container here and a lid for it as a lens. And after a couple of experiments, I got something that fits pretty well, and these holes on the side do fit the connector. You just have to knock off any of the printing artifacts. Not sure how well you can see this on the black filament, but you can, there's little blobs and stuff, and you see that little distortion there. So just knock that off with a knife and a little needle file and just clean those up, and these guys fit in there pretty well. Kind of like that. There we go. I will have to glue that in eventually, but then the other connector sits on just like that on the outside. And I chose, for no particular reason, to have the pin one as the input side there and the flat one as the output side. So we'll have one input and can have up to 6 outputs. I think I'm only going to put on a couple right now because I only have 5 pairs of the 3-pin connector, and since I'm going to be using addressable LEDs, I want to use the 3-pin connectors so that we have power, data, and ground. So those snapped in place, 2 outputs and 1 input for now. Like I said, because I've got a limited number of these connectors, I'm not going to get completely carried away right now, but I think I will glue them in with this clear UV resin. I'm probably not going to need too much on each one, just a little bit on the back here, and that should, I think, hold them. Just quickly give it a little shot of UV from the UV flashlight that came with the glue. It surprisingly doesn't take all that much. So next we'll dig through the bin of LED strips and see if we can find something appropriate. Those ones look promising, although they have 3 different LEDs controlled by a single chip, so they're a little bit spread out. What do we got here? Oh, there's some addressable ones, sort of those. That's just 1 meter. What is that? Oh, there's a spool of addressable LEDs. Those ones are weatherproof. Nah, those not necessarily. The neon? No. I think I'll go with these ones. And I wish I had more with the black backing on them, although the white may not show through there. But let's start with one of these white ones. Oh, and it looks like there's 3 1-meter sections on that spool. Okay, so if I sized this right, that should fit just underneath the connector. Perfect. So I'll just wrap them around the inside there. I think I might snip that first one off just to preserve the connector, because I use that for something else. So I don't really need that. And then I can start with this guy. So it looks like I'll have to disconnect this at the point where they joined the strips together to make the longer strip anyway. All right, that's easy. I'm going to be soldering there anyway. The fact that there's already solder blobs on there doesn't hurt me any. And the remains are just enough for that. Cool. So I need about 1/2 meter per one of these things. That's nice. I guess I should have mentioned before, when I designed these, I designed them to be 15 centimeters, 150 millimeters across the from the flats, and what are they? They look like they're about 25 millimeters thick. That probably doesn't matter too much. I mean, you can, if you're designing something like this, you can make them whatever size you want, obviously. But I will have the STL files for the lid and this thing available down below if you're interested in doing something like this on your own. Though, as I said, there's probably dozens and dozens of variants on this on Printables and Thingiverse and all the other websites like that, if you choose. The other thing I'm going to need is a controller. And I have decided to use one of these ESP-01, which is an ESP-8266, with only a couple of pins on it that are exposed. But that is enough to connect to one of these little boards here, which is called an ESP-01 RGB LED module. And on it, it has the 8-pin connector for the ESP-01. It has a 3-pin connector here for VCC ground and signal. There's a 2-pin connector there for VCC and ground, and it has a single push button there that hits the reset button on the ESP-8266. With those coupled together, it is a nice compact little module. There's tons of different software that you could use for this thing, of course, and while WLED is one of the most popular ones, I chose to use this one, WS2812FX. It's just another one, it's just a choice. Again, you could use anything you want. You could even write your own, like my kid and I did years ago for my Christmas lights project. Anyway, this is just a straightforward Arduino sketch. The library comes with a bunch of examples, and this is the one that I'm going to use. It's called ESP-8266 Web Interface. It sets up a web page on the thing. You can set a static IP to it, which makes it easier to find. Or you can go for a dynamically applied IP if you prefer, but I like a static one. That way I know exactly where it's going to be. And that's what I chose. Give it your SSID and your password. No, this is not my real password. And you set which pin it is that the data is coming out on. And in this case, I'm using pin 2 because that is what is wired up on that module. And the rest of it is exactly how it comes out of the box, which means no extra programming, which makes me very happy. So you load that up onto your ESP module in the usual way. I'm not going to demonstrate that right now because you've seen it 100 times. And with that loaded on, I've just made a label on there so that I can identify it later if I forget. With that loaded on, apply some 5 volts and ground and power it on, and we have light, which we can, of course, control from the computer or from any computer on your network, including your phone. And then you can send all sorts of different presets that they've got on there. You can do anything that you want, of course, but this is the presets that they have set on it. You can do, any number of different effects. I think, though, I'm going to run with something like that on my wall lights, maybe, or possibly a static, or possibly just a slow color wipe that'll run across them all. Next, I think I'm going to need some short bits of wire connecting onto the inputs, and I'll figure out the outputs later, but I will need to do that, obviously. Let's solder those bits of wires onto the input end of the LED strip. And there shouldn't be any mechanical strain on those, so I don't think I have to worry about reinforcing that. And I think it would be wise to not stick these in place until I have all the wires tacked on. So what I think I'm going to do for the 2 outputs, I'm going to pick up power and ground from there and from there. And I think at this end, I'm going to join power and ground together. By having power injection at both ends of the LED strip, it should help keep the brightness even around there, dealing with any of the resistance in the tracks. Hopefully there's not too much. And then I will have the input data come from there, and the output data come off there, and jump that to both this output and this output in parallel. Because as I discovered experimenting a couple of winters ago, you can feed multiple inputs, multiple data inputs from a single output on these, and then basically your signal branches off in two different directions. So I think that is what I will do. Although this wire that I chose there is a little bit heavy for the task, I might move on to a little bit lighter gauge wire. Probably some of this 24 gauge stranded. It's a little bit more flexible. This is 18, which is, you know, good for current carrying, but I don't think it's necessary in this application. And hopefully this will be enough. If not, I'll replace it with something else. But in the meantime, we'll do that. The downside of that is that my color coding is going to get completely random. But if you know anything about me and my color blindness, color codes tend to be a little bit irrelevant anyway to me. So I just go with what I have and trace it out and hope for the best. So as I've been working on the power wires, I've been thinking about what to do with the data. One option, as I suggested, was to take off the end of the strip and run back and to the two outputs and run them in parallel. The other option is to just tap the data off in the middle here and run them out in the two different branches, or 5 different branches when I get enough connectors. And what that will do, if I've got a pattern going, the pattern will run to here, and then it will run off this way and also around this way. And then when it gets to here, it will continue this way and also run off that way into the next light. So I think I'm going to do that. It simplifies the wiring, which is not the main reason that I'm doing it, but it certainly does contribute to that. But it also, I think, might make for an interesting lighting effect. And if I don't like it, I can always change it later, because this is my project and I can do what I want. So now we'll just lay this in here. And I think I'm to the point where I can start attaching them. I think that might make it actually a little bit easier. And we'll just start again at the start and end connector. Put a little crease in. Fortunately, these seem to fit well enough that the little joiner pads hit in the corners, so I don't have to crease it right where there's an LED, which is nice. I did not design it for that. That's just a happy accident. Now then, we have a little bit of bulge of wiring there at the input. Yeah, that is the input connector. Okay, good. I didn't mess that up. I'll get the input data connector or pin soldered onto the center pin. That is obviously where that's going to go. Now then, plus and minus, I'm going to have to decide which one is which and then stick to it all the way around. And just for ease, I'm going to use a little bit of red electrical tape to mark which one is the positive, which I have decided arbitrarily is the left one on that pin. So I'll solder down the negative input over here. Oh, these magnetic connectors are proving to be a bit of a challenge to solder, because they're magnetic and my iron tip is, well, iron. And it keeps grabbing on. But I'm going to wait to solder up the others until I make up an input cable here just to match that. And I'm going to use this 3-wire cable, which is sold online as for solenoids. But of course you don't have to use that for solenoids. You can use it for whatever you want. And since this connection is going to be flapping around in the breeze a little bit, I think I'm going to put a little bit of heat shrink on it just for some mechanical stability and electrical protection. So the center pin is obvious where it goes, and that is the data pin. And now, which way around does this guy go? All right, that's where the magnets want to be, which means that the red power positive voltage goes over here. Magnet, behave. And the remaining wire, which is going to be my negative voltage. I know white is not always negative voltage, but it is going to be in my case. And a bit of hot heat shrink action. Keep those guys electrically protected from each other. And then slide this bit down here to hold them all together into a nice tight bundle so that they don't cause any problems, hopefully. And then I'll yard off a length of this. I don't know how far out I need to go. Yeah, that's probably good. And that will run off to our controller, which I'm going to have to put into a little box or something, but a 3D printed box is nothing challenging. And since I don't have any of these connectors loose, these ones just came with the thing, I'm going to have to figure out what they are and order up some of those so that I've got them for future reference. But I think what I'll probably do is just solder that right onto the back of the connector to make it much more firm and solid and somewhat permanent. So, this is not how I wanted this video to continue, but this is what we got to work with because one of the files was corrupted for reasons that I can't explain. So the last thing you saw was me soldering the wires onto the output connector that go over to this magnetic dude here. And after that, I soldered down a 5.2mm jack onto the power pins so that I could power it like this. And I think you can see, yeah, you can see the light comes on there. So that powers that up, provides 3.3 volts to the ESP through a little regulator on the board, and then also provides voltage out to, well, to that connector, which is now this cable here. And the other thing that I did was just to verify that the magnetic polarity of these was all the same, and I marked them. Not sure whether I did that on video or not, but anyway, that way so I can be consistent when I make more of these. So plug that on there and plug this in here, and we should get lights over here. There we go. So that is all well and good, and I think I've mentioned that I had printed these lenses. I'm not super thrilled about them because you can see all of the spots in there. It might be interesting, might not be, I don't know. That is 3 layers of transparent. I printed 2 others in opaque white. This one has 3 layers, this one has 2 layers. And if I turn off the lights above the bench, so there's just a bit of ambient room light on here, I think you can see that this thing is glowing pretty good, and you can just see the glow. You can't really see the individual LEDs, which I like. That's the 3 layers of white. This is the 2 layers of white, which I think shows up even better. This is really hard to photograph, by the way. But I think this one looks pretty good. Although, you know, that pixely look, if you're going for that, that's not too bad either. I don't know. I'll let you guys comment on that below. Meanwhile, lights are coming back. So there is some options there. And of course, this little project is not all that great unless you have more lights to tie onto it. So I did another one, which is exactly the same inside. And that, where's my input side? I should be able to just plonk that on there, and away it goes. Let's, just for the demonstration, let's do this. And that does exactly the same thing. And then I printed a third one. However, because I don't have enough connectors left, because I only ordered 5 pairs just for the initial experiment, I only have an input on this one and no output. So I've got the wires all prepped and taped down with Kapton so that they can't cause any problems. Can't be naughty little boys. And that should be able to just plug right onto there. Look at that. I am quite pleased with how this project turned out. Less so about the video, but the project itself is pretty damn cool. And of course, because I have the magnetic connectors, the outputs on there and there and back there, so I could just take this one, rearrange this guy, plonk it on back there, and it works back there too. And once I get some more of those connectors, I will be printing off some more of these and making more up just to make this into an actual decorative wall light for the basement. And at the same time, I will be printing up a little box for this guy so that he doesn't get in trouble. But for now, that is just fine the way it is. I will link to my STL files down below with both the 3-layer and the 2-layer, and depending on what filaments you've got if you want to do this. I'll also link to the connectors that I used. I don't know what else to say about this other than I'm really annoyed that video file was corrupted. On the other hand, this video is much shorter than it was going to be because I had a lot more detail in it. But I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Questions, comments, links, all that down below. I will talk to you later.